did. Well, a friend had some food. Hey, we're going to join
It's
first.
fine. It's spray. It's heavy. Yeah, it's spray.
Despite being from my residence from Kroger.
Unnaturally quiet in here. What's going on?
We're drawing off.
We're waiting for the bells. Did anybody hear the bells at 9:30?
No.
Is the bells plugged in? Did we get a lightning strike or something? Because my watch says 10 o'clock.
Another
I got 9:59.
You got 9:59? I always try to be early every place I go. We'll give it a.
There.
A watch pot never boils. All right, welcome to First Universalist Church of New Madison on this, I like to call the day of deluge. I mean, it has rained and rained and rained. Supposed to be April showers bring May flowers. I think we may have flipped that unless we're going to get a lot of flowers in June. First of all, I'm happy to announce, after all the rain we've had, the basement is still dry. If you remember the problems we've had in the past. So now I just have to get off my hiney and get the drywall put on and taped up and painted, but that's not going to be the primary thing we're doing. So, do we have any other announcements? Janet's flowers are still looking good. Hopefully Janet is in a pace of peace. Hopefully the family has found some peace with everything that went on. Beautiful service. The graveside service was pretty spectacular. We got a nice card from the family thanking the church for our contributions and support, which we always appreciate. And even though time goes on, we are still there for anyone in the family if they need anything. And we can always call on Derek for some professional assistance if that's needed. Although Derek, at this moment, is in Arizona with his partner, and I think it's his mother that he's visiting. In-law, okay. For a couple of weeks. But he's also always available by phone. He's always willing to help out. He's quite the person, so we're glad to have him with us. I've got Mike Short's phone number, so I'm gonna get a hold of him to try and do some filling in. And I still haven't heard back from Nancy. She's supposed to do another one in May and another one in June, so I'm gonna have to remind her that May is kind of running out here. So, okay. Anything else for announcements? Our welcome. Well, forgot to mention, what's today? Mother's Day. So you're going to see Mother's Day a la Tim, which means not many people, but a lot of animals. So hope you'll enjoy that. This is, Mother's Day is supposed to be a day of joy, and for some people it's not. It's still Mother's Day. So this is by Amy Williams Clark, who had some difficulties in her life and penned this. Mother's Day can be hard. It is a day where children and motherhood are celebrated, where the biological process of birth is focused upon and the ways that women are mothers through biology or adoption. It can be a lonely time for those of us whose arms are empty, whose cradles are cavernous, whose wombs are worn. Miscarriage, infertility, stillbirths are not celebrated on Mother's Day. Why would they be? There is no child, therefore no mother. Yet, here we are, a silent, grieving sisterhood whose bodies are unable or have not produced, and whose wombs echo with grief. The pain of this sisterhood is not unknown to you who are mothers. We are a sisterhood of silent struggle. Excuse me. We are childless mothers. What can be said today? Only that once again, it is Mother's Day for everyone. Our prelude, Stardust by Hoagie Carmichael. Young. We praise that talent that can pluck those notes out of the air and put them on paper, and then take them off the paper and put them in our ears. Our chalice lighting is by Cynthia Landrum. She's a frequent contributor to the Unitarian Universalist support page. Connection and commitment. As we kindle this flame, may it spark in each of us connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other. That is why we come to church. Our affirmation, let me start moving this. A little behind. Obviously, the first set of mothers, it doesn't matter how big or how small you are. And everybody knows what a problem kids can be, but you just sit there and enjoy it. Our affirmation is Siding with Love by Lisa Friedman. You never know when the moment of decision will come. Perhaps it is on the school playground when you see the class bully picking on a new victim, or standing in the checkout line at the grocery store behind a young mother whose screaming child has her at her wit's end. Or in staff forum at work when your pledge to take some unleave paid days could help save a co-worker's job. Such moments come in different ways to each of us, but they do come. They remind us that the decisions we make in our day-to-day lives do make a difference. They point out the ongoing choices we make between standing uncomfortably on the sidelines of our messy world, unsure of what to do, and acting deliberately in small but concrete ways to help create a kinder, more compassionate reality. They return us to the powerful truth that in critical times it is possible to stand on the side of love, and in the mystic's words, to help its mighty power to surge upward and surmount every obstacle by defending, supporting, and advocating for each other as if we were all equals in our humanity. Or do they? After all, are we fallible human beings really that powerful? If siding with love is so significant, then why isn't the world a better place already? Don't most people already think of themselves as siding with love? Or at least as much love as they can manage, given that most of us cannot live as saints? Love is a spiritual paradox. It is precisely because we live in a world which knows the evils of greed and violence and the seas of human indifference that we understand just how sacred it is when our acts of love and compassion actually triumph. And it is precisely because we live in a world which knows such triumphs that we cannot fully give up hope on our imperfect humanity. If there is one thing I appreciate about our Unitarian Universalist Association invitation to siding with love in these current times, it is that the invitation invites love as an active force in our lives. So much of our understanding of love can be passive. We talk of falling in love, or being helplessly in love, or we assume love's automatic presence in a family or a home or a community and are shocked to learn otherwise. But I do believe that love is more than merely a power that claims us. It is also a power that we claim by choosing our response to the truths of our world. Love is a choice, whether we are at the bedside of a loved one dying or at the side of a stranger we have only just met. The love which inspires the courage and commitment of such choices is not sweet or sentimental kind of love. Rather, it is a love which recognizes the greater good and the bonds of kinship of which we are a part. Once we accept love as a choice, then we must also come to terms with where that choice leads us. This was the profound and radical insight of our Universalist forebears, that if love comes from God, then there can be no exceptions. Love cannot be just for one or some of us. If it is for any of us, it must be for all. Love cannot just be for those with loud voices, but also for the voiceless. Love cannot be just for those with power, but also for those who are marginalized. Love cannot be just for those who still hope, but also for those who despair that help and hope will never come. So take a moment to reflect on this particular time in your own life, in the lives of your family, your friends, and in the state of our community and our world. Who needs us to side with them in love? What moral questions does our commitment to love call us to address in the coming year? I don't have the answers, nor are the choices only mine to make. But I lift up these questions to spark a conversation as individual people who care about this world and as a community of faith, memory, and hope. Recently, reflecting on the opportunities to stand for love, a friend of mine asked, why does it have to be a side? Must there always be a side? I understand her regret. The last thing our world needs is more division. One answer might be that the call to siding with love is made in the spirit of inclusion. But I also think that we are being invited to occupy a new place or a new side of understanding of what it means to live spiritually in our world. Love is a choice. It is a deep, life-changing passion, not just for our hearts, but also for our souls. Our opening hymn is 38. Morning has broken. A perfect choice for today. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. And we certainly have a dew fall today. Thank you. And my dad used to say, nothing prettier than pigs on pasture. You don't see that much anymore. But they really love to be outside when they're allowed to, and we can talk about factory farming sometime, which is a scourge of the world. When I was a dairy farmer, we had 50 milking and had 100 cows altogether. Now you can't make any money unless you have 500, and the Dutch have come over and they have 10,000 cows in one place. Those cows don't have names. Every one of our cows have a name. All right, children's story. And who could pass up a deer? Dandelions in the garden. Oh, I had a giraffe and a baby giraffe picture, and I forgot to put it in. That would have been perfect. This is the mother giraffe and watering her flowers. It's spring. Basil had waited all winter for the frost to leave the earth so he could plant a garden. He hurried to the garden nursery and bought red begonias, purple petunias, and white impatiens. Pretty much exactly what I bought this spring. He carefully prepared the soil and planted his seedlings. Every day Basil went to his garden to look at his flowers. The garden overflowed with colors, red, purple, white, exactly as he had dreamed. But one day, Basil found something unexpected. Dandelion weeds, he said in dismay. Basil hadn't planted any dandelions, and he didn't want them. With their yellow petals and spiky green leaves, he wanted only red begonias, purple petunias, and white impatiens. So he used a trowel to dig up every weed he could find. It's a pretty garden indeed, Basil said as he enjoyed his flowers. The next day, when Basil went out to admire his garden, he saw that the dandelions had returned. He talked to his neighbor about what to do. If you really want to get rid of them, you have to keep after them, Brunhilde said. Dig them out as soon as you can. Every day, Basil crouched in his garden and crept on his knees. As soon as the first dandelion poked through the soil, he attacked it. But every time he went to his garden, he discovered more dandelions. He gave up his trowel and used a shovel, but still the dandelions grew. And we all know the worst thing you can do with weeds is turn the soil, because all that does is uncover more weed seeds. If you wanted to get rid of them, you should have mulched, but that's just a sidelight. He pulled and plucked, pinched and plowed, snipped and yanked. No matter what he did, the dandelions kept coming back. Every day, more dandelions. Once again, Basil went to Brunhilde. You have to try harder, Brunhilde advised. If you really don't want them, you mustn't give up. Basil decided from then on he would sleep in the garden. He would catch the dandelions the moment they broke through the soil. But the giraffe soon grew tired. He fell asleep with his head against the fence, and when the sun rose, Basil jumped to his feet and scoured the garden. He pulled a dandelion here, he pulled a dandelion there, until he was exhausted. Basil was so tired that his midday nap stretched into his nighttime sleep. Then there. Next morning, Basil followed the same routine, but no matter what he did and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't completely rid the garden of dandelions. One red begonia, one dandelion. One purple petunia, one dandelion. One white impatiens, one dandelion. What do I do now? He asked Brunhilde. There is only one thing left to do, she said. I suggest you learn to love dandelions. But I want flowers, not weeds, Basil complained. He thought that Brunhilde was teasing him. A weed is only a name that we give to an unloved flower, Brunhilde continued. You don't have to rid your garden of all the dandelions. Indeed, a few dandelions will make your garden even more beautiful. Basil thought about what Brunhilde had said as he returned to his garden. He looked at his flowers, red begonias, purple petunias, and white impatiens. And then he could see that the dandelions were flowers too. From then on, Basil made sure that each flower had its proper place, and just as Brunhilde had predicted, he enjoyed his garden more than ever. A garden of red begonias, purple petunias, white impatiens, and yellow dandelions. Many things are beautiful. This is the author's note. Why do you think Basil didn't find dandelions beautiful at first? Any ideas? If you let begonias go, they're not going to take over your garden. If you let impatiens go, you can barely keep them alive. But if you let dandelions go, those little buggers will crowd everything else out. So there is a place in the world for everything. And I understand why Basil was in trouble. Can you imagine a giraffe trying to get down on the ground? All right. Joys and concerns.
I would just like to bring up again this week our concern, our outpouring of love and concern and caring to the people in India and what they are dealing with, and also heartened by the response of the world, the countries who have sent oxygen, something we take for granted in this country, and also medical equipment, protective equipment, and most importantly, it's a good thing in the world, such responsiveness.
Yes, and let me throw in as another political aside, which, as everybody knows, I'm getting looser and looser with. The government of India has kind of mirrored the government, our previous government of the United States, in denying there was a problem and denying to do any isolation or anything else until the situation has practically overwhelmed the country. There are thousands and thousands of people dying in India every day, and they're dying because they've run out of oxygen, which they could have prepared for. They knew it was coming. One moral dilemma we have to face: the EU and the United States have all refused to release the patents on the vaccines. There are good reasons for and against. One thing is, if you release the patents, India would have to build the facilities, create the thing. It would be months before they actually had the vaccines. Wouldn't it be better just to send them the vaccine to use as opposed to give them the patents? And I can see from the company's point of view, if you give them release from the patents, they're going to crowd into the market, and these companies want to make some profit. Hopefully we can prevent them from making obscene profits, but everything has to balance out in the long run. So there's rights and wrongs on both sides. The one common denominator is human suffering throughout. And this is not just in India. Brazil is suffering from the same type of political leadership that denied everything, and the deaths are just overwhelming in Brazil. And the danger is not over here. We're not going to reach herd immunity, which means at least 80 or 90% of people have to either be immune from having the disease or have the vaccination, and there's a certain percentage which mirrors another percentage that we're all familiar with that are refusing to get the vaccinations and refusing to wear masks and take preventative measures. So we are all still in danger, which is why if you're watching on Facebook, everybody here is 6 feet apart, everybody here is wearing a mask except me, and I put it on when I go down. We sterilize or sanitize everything, thanks to Margaret, when we come in, and actually we do it after we leave too. So I think we're as safe, and plus I think all of us have had our vaccination, and even though we've all had it, we still don't relent, we still don't relax our preparations and our safety measures. That's what you have to do. Yes?
I was in Cincinnati for a couple of days,
Okay.
and everybody is wearing masks in Cincinnati.
Really? Everybody is wearing masks. Good. Because as we mentioned last week at Janet's funeral, it was packed, it has an overflowing crowd. Probably 20% maybe were wearing masks. So, and I've been, you know, as you travel through Greenville, I go to the auto parts store, I go to the Rural King. The employees are wearing masks because they have to, but you can tell the ones that don't want to because they haven't pulled down over their mouth. If your nose isn't covered, you're really not wearing a mask. The virus escapes through your nose. So just no matter what anybody else does, let me encourage you to wear your own mask and do your own protection. Wash your hands. This is not over yet. So. Okay, our message is called, do we have any others? Sorry, I hate to rush through that. And I need to, I guess we'll light a candle. Oh, there's a bright one. We don't see that very often. And we'll light a candle for those hopes, dreams, fears, trepidations that we hold close to our hearts and are not able to share. We are here to help. If anybody needs any help, just let us know and we will do whatever we are able. Okay, our message. Hello, fire. By Scott Alexander. It was still dark that morning in 1942 when the Gestapo rousted from bed the Jews of Boława, a Polish village. In the confusion, 12-year-old Samuel Olener slipped away and hid on a roof, still in his pajamas, or if you're from northern Indiana, Ruth. The next afternoon, when he dared to look around, the ghetto was silent. The Jews of Boława were murdered that day. By then, they were lying in a mass grave in the nearby countryside. Samuel found some clothes in an empty house, and skirting the German patrols and Polish looters, he fled to the country. There, after walking for 2 days, he found his way to the farmhouse of Walwinia Piuk. These are all Polish names, which I have no idea how to pronounce, so I'm guessing. If anybody would like to correct me, please do so. A peasant woman who had been friendly with his family. Mrs. Piuk knew when Samuel knocked on the door that she would be shot if the Germans found her harboring a Jew. Without hesitation, she took Samuel in. Walwinia taught Samuel the rituals of Polish Catholic life, how to go to confession, how to pray, the catechism. With her help, Samuel posed as an impoverished Polish stable boy in search of work and a place to live. Thus it was that Samuel Olener survived the war. He had to pretend to be a Catholic to make it through. He had to learn the rituals and blend in with everybody else to survive. It is with this moving story that a recent New York Times article on what makes for human goodness began. Clearly it was Mrs. Piuk's uncommon and courageous goodness which snatched this young Jewish boy from certain death. By some estimates, as many as 200,000 Jews, like Samuel Olener, were saved from Nazi butchers by good-hearted, non-Jewish rescuers. Now, a group of social scientists is reaching, as they put it, into the cauldron of good and evil that was World War II to study those exemplars of human goodness, to see if there are any common identifiable characteristics among those brave and beautiful people who altruistically risk everything to save others. The director of this project, you might be interested to know, is an eminent sociologist from Humboldt State University in California, a man by the name of Samuel Oliner. We want to find the common threads among those few who helped, Oliner writes. We want to know the differences between the rescuers and those who might have helped but chose to look the other way. He and his research team already have interviewed 140 of what another author has called righteous Gentiles, and are racing against the clock to reach more of these good souls before they die of old age all over Europe. But Dr. Oliner's project on the sources of human compassion and altruism has been able to establish some preliminary conclusions about the character of those who selflessly helped. I find them personally fascinating, as well as of vast importance to us as religious people who strive to be good. What the sociologists generally found is that most of those who bravely hid Jews from Hitler's final solution share two personal characteristics. First, they were people with a strong sense of personal self-worth. And secondly, they all had a clear set of compassionate human values learned in childhood. Now let's take a look at these two foundations for human goodness in turn, to see what they might have to teach us. First, I think it should not surprise us that these rescuers of humanity share a strong sense of personal worth and security. For doesn't it make perfect psychological sense that, generally speaking, one has to feel good about one's own self before one is able to express much goodness toward others? Think about these as we go along, and maybe we can discuss, or you can think about it as you get home. Because as you know, this is a constant question that I bring up, is what causes people to do good and what causes people to not do good or actually participate in doing bad. This, of course, is not a new idea. For well over 2,000 years ago, Jesus framed his enduring gospel of human responsibility and goodness this way: love your neighbor as you love yourself. Even in his primitive pre-psychological age, Jesus seems to have intuitively understood that love and respect for self is the spiritual prerequisite for love and respect directed toward others. In our time, it has been the humanistic psychologists, most notably Maslow and Fromm, who have asserted that self-esteem and personal security are the starting places for all healthy and humane human relationships and societies. And this makes perfect practical sense, doesn't it? For how, I ask, can I be respectful and loving and nurturing toward humanity around me if I despise and loathe the humanness within me? If I don't respect and revere the manifestations of personhood I know best, namely my own self in this familiar little sheath of skin, how in God's name will I respect and revere those often odd and idiosyncratic human manifestations that all of you are? Clearly, love and respect for self creates the core of human affirmation, from which love and respect for others springs. It should not surprise us then to hear that they knew of their own humanity, their own human beauty, their own worth, and therefore could readily see and want to protect the human beauty and worth of strangers when the knock came at the door. I'm not sure I'm 100% with this. Do you have to believe in yourself? Do you have to have faith in yourself before you can help others? I don't know. And isn't the opposite also true? When we are unkind or indifferent to human beings around us, doesn't our unseemly behavior most often have its basis in our own self-negation? Let me be the first to crawl into the confession booth this morning. When I catch myself expressing inappropriate anger, mean-spiritedness, or cruel indifference toward other individuals or groups, I invariably discover that my lack of compassion says more about the ways in which I don't feel good about myself rather than anything objectively objectionable about those to whom my venom is directed. When I unnecessarily hurt, abuse, or neglect someone else, it usually arises from some hurt, abused, or neglected part of me. My lack of goodness is invariably a reflection of my own pain and inadequacy as a person, caused by anything wrong with those to whom my toxicity is directed. Do we all understand or believe that the people who do evil to other people are damaged themselves? Our living experience tells us that's true, but is it true in all those cases? And I frankly doubt that any of you are much different. When you turn your backs or withhold goodness and decency from some human being, you undoubtedly do so from some wounded, broken, or insecure place in your soul. The authors of these studies on goodness are absolutely correct. The better you feel about your own self, the better you are likely to treat others. The psychological logic of it all is undeniable. And this truth leads me to the next point that the sociologists studying the sources of human goodness have made. People who have shown themselves to be uncommonly altruistic universally had childhoods made secure by warm, nurturing parents. Adults who their generous expressions of love help these individuals to feel positive about themselves and safe in the world. Dr. Erwin Staub of the University of Massachusetts puts it this way: there is a pattern of child rearing that seems to encourage altruism in later years. A warm, nurturing relationship between parent and child is essential, and this too makes utter psychological sense to us, doesn't it? For surely it follows that if our parents pass on to us a strong sense of our own personal worth and dignity, that we will naturally be inclined to confirm and celebrate the human worth and dignity of others from that core of happy wholeness and health. And here you have to look back to your own childhood, your own parents. I know people who came from pretty nasty places and turned out to be really nice people. So I'm not sure I put 100% credence in that. I know people that came from loving, caring, really nice homes that turned out to be really evil. So we're doing nature and nurture. There's got to be some genetic component there that flips the switch on or off, or at least puts pressure on it. So all I'm saying is, as Unitarian Universalists, as scientifically related people, keep an open mind, weigh the facts, and do your own investigations. But still, interesting projection as he's making. And this also, unfortunately, seems to be supported by negative example in our everyday experience. Whenever you read a psychological study of some heinous murderer and violent sociopath, you find that almost to the last man and woman, these hurtful people had unhappy, insecure, and non-nurturing childhoods. Those who are hurt early often grow up later to hurt others. Recent studies reveal that child abusers are almost always people who were themselves abused when young, though blessedly many who were abused are able to healthily move past those hurtful patterns. And I think we can probably agree with that. If you come to a heinous murderer or someone who is viciously cruel and nasty, they almost always were damaged as children. And thus we arrive at a truth for all adults that is important as it is obvious. If we want our children and our next human generation to act compassionately and respectfully toward one another, then we must show them by the living example of our thoughts, words, and deeds that they are loved and respected. The only way our young truly learn that human beings deserve to be treated gently and humanely is by receiving that decent treatment themselves. It seems obvious from these studies that if we are to have a better world where people are spontaneously treated with compassion and concern, we must first and foremost instill in our children an appropriate sense of our own self-dignity, our own self-worth, dignity, and value. But as Oliner and other social scientists studying human goodness are quick to point out, a healthy sense of personal worth developed in childhood is not in and of itself a sufficient foundation for altruism and goodness. For they have concluded that the second common thread, as they discovered in their search for these compassionate heroes of the Holocaust, is just as indispensable as the first, namely that all of these good, unquote, people possessed a personal set of compassionate values that had been passed on to them by their parents. Dr. Staub concludes that while a warm and nurturing relationship between parent and child is essential for altruism, it nonetheless, I quote, must be coupled with compassionate values, unquote, which provide the individual with the moral direction and strength to help others, even when it comes at great danger or cost to themselves. In another study of human goodness and compassion, Dr. Zonlander agrees that it is the nurturant but moralizing parent who arouses the child concerned action, in the child concerned action. The parent who is nurturing but not permissive, and that they have a clear set of moral and behavioral expectations for the child. We need to think about that. In my own experience, I did not really experience that, and yet I consider myself compassionate and nurturing. And there's always questions in the way you're raised. And sometimes the interesting thing is you don't realize those questions until a long time has passed, until sometime a parent has passed away and you're reflecting on their life. You have revelations all the time. It's kind of like self-diagnosis.
Okay.
Now, please understand that Dr. Wexler and others are not talking about moralistic, quote-unquote, parents here who rant and rave for hours on end at their kids about what is right and wrong. What they are talking about are genuinely moral parents who, by everyday example, teach clear moral values and compassionate behavior. As Harvey Hornstein puts it in his fascinating little book, Cruelty and Kindness, children who become humane adults do so because they once had opportunities to observe loving caretakers being concerned about the welfare of other human beings. They learn goodness, quite simply, by example. And Dr. Perry London, who did his own study of the rescuers of Jews during World War II, adds that these human heroes had intense identification with the parental model of moral conduct. We always have to ask ourselves in science, are they finding something they were looking for? That's different than finding something you didn't know was there. It seems then to be, as Dr. Hornstein suggests, if the sins of the fathers and mothers are visited upon their children, so too are their good deeds. It is surely, as I always say to the parents of infants during the ceremonies of naming and dedication, as they charge them to their awesome parental responsibilities, the parent's goodness becomes the child's goodness. Their evil, the child's evil, and also their wisdom, courage, openness, and the adventure of their beliefs. So all of these diverse insights about the genesis of goodness in an individual being says, give or take the same thing. Children pick up compassionate values for adulthood by seeing those values lived out by their adult caretakers. And they must be modeled, not just modeled, if they are to really become enduring realities in the personalities of the young. It's that simple. Unitarian bard Ralph Waldo Emerson understood this awesome moral responsibility of adulthood when he declared in the middle of the last century, the gods we worship write their names on our faces. Be sure of that. And a man or a woman will worship something and have no doubt about that either. He or she may think that this tribute is being paid in secret in the dark recesses of the heart, but it will out. That which dominates our imagination and our thought will determine our life and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful about what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming. And so all of us who ever touch the lives of children, and that is all of us, for parenting is a responsibility in which all adults share, must realize the power and importance of our everyday example. More than what we say we believe, it's how we live. How good and loving we are to other human beings who share this journey called life with us, that has a large and lasting impact on those young folks who are so scrupulously watching. And oh, how attentively they watch, don't they? They don't miss a trick, any of our hypocrisies. Their crap detectors are working at full blast all the time. And don't fool yourselves into thinking that your everyday moral actions are less important. We are the shapers and molders of the next generation, and the quality of our deeds will go a long way toward deciding the quality of the human future. All right. All these observations about the absolute importance of adult modeling of human compassion and goodness surely make sense to us. We've heard it all before. But I fear I've gotten ahead of myself in this discussion on the sources of human goodness, for I have not yet suggested just where the basic impulse to treat others compassionately comes from. I must ask, when all is said and done, what fundamental spiritual attitude of the human heart gives birth to goodness? I am shifting from psychology to spirituality now, which is why we are here. I suppose there are any number of respectable answers for so vast and important a question, especially among free-thinking Unitarian Universalists. But I personally most resonate to Harvey Hornstein's striking simple example. He suggests what makes for altruism and compassion in our world is people passionately feeling their fundamental connections with other human beings. We are good to those around us when we know deep down to the centers of our trembling hearts that they belong beautifully and irretrievably to us as fellow human beings on this holy and tender planet Earth. Hornstein believes that human compassion and goodness are fundamentally given birth in our world through people who spiritually feel, and now I use his nomenclature, the bonds of we, rather than the barriers of them. The bonds of we, not the barriers of them. This hopeful human idea, which understands the importance of seeing human connectors rather than dividers, resonates beautifully with my understanding of the soul of our noble religion. For lying at the compassionate center of Unitarian Universalism is the astounding idea that every man, woman, and child on earth is a precious part of a family. The human family of universal belonging and mutual responsibility. Our liberal faith has a vision of humanity's indissoluble oneness. There is no avoiding it. If we take our Unitarian Universalism to heart, it is up to each one of us to treat every member of our family with just as much kindness, justice, and respect as we can, our human family and our personal family. Some religions in this privatistic and selfish age say little more than look out for good old number one. Work on your personal salvation. Get yourself to heaven. Never mind the rest of struggling humanity. Such religion, dominated as it is by the goal of personal salvation, is little more, in my view, than spiritual narcissism. A selfish path of the heart that refuses to hear the crying demands for goodness and justice that lie beyond the immediate little sphere of self and family. Many are the tribal religions which cast the world into us versus them struggles. Sadly, in our time, many are the religions of individualism and isolations which free the believer from worldwide human responsibility. Sounds a little prideful, doesn't it? But sometimes you have to step back and say, this looks like the truth to me. I'm not trying to be prideful. I'm trying to say we have faith and value every human being, not just those who believe we do. But ours, thank God, is a relational religion, a religion that would have us aware and alive to the irreducible oneness that exists between ourselves and human beings everywhere. A religion that calls us into close, caring, and compassionate communion with peoples of all kinds and colors, no matter how different they might seem at first. Ours is a faith that has always dreamt of people everywhere becoming like family, one humanity relating in ever more intricate patterns of compassion and respect. Unitarian Universalism is the demand to be gently and responsibly related to life and persons around you. And this church knows, with Hornstein and other global thinkers, that genuine compassion for others is best and most beautifully born in the cockles of the human heart, which feels those indissoluble connections, the wonderful oneness. And we will not only be genuinely good to one another when we know, by God, that every last human person with whom we share life on this fragile little planet is preciously a part of my family, my tribe, my country, me, by God, a part of me. There is a wonderful Hasidic tale told by the Holocaust survivor Eli Wiesel, which I feel makes the reality and importance of our human connectedness with one another come to life. A story goes that a young man in Jerusalem wanted to visit Rome, which was then the ruling capital of Western civilization, a very strange and difficult place from Jewish Jerusalem. His mother protested, as worrying mothers are wont to do, particularly Jewish mothers, and asked them, how will you eat? Where will you sleep? He didn't have any answers. yet he wanted to go on his adventures to Rome. His mother finally relented, but said, "I am sure you will find food, but for sleep, you must take this pillow. At night, go outside the walls of Rome and put your head on this pillow, and you will have rest." The son did as she asked, and each night, after enjoying the sights, the sounds, the carnivals of Rome, he would leave that city and take his pillow and find sleep in the countryside. But one night, right before falling asleep, his pillow caught fire. Why? Because that night, the temple in Jerusalem burned. Wiesel goes on to explain that the reason, in his tradition, no member of the widely scattered Jewish community lives in isolation. On a very real, mystical level, what happens to one Jew happens to all Jews, for they are spiritually and mystically bound together in one being, one indissoluble community. It was that precious bonds of human community and connectedness which set fire to the boy's pillow, that kept him awake and alive to that which troubled his brothers and sisters back in Jerusalem. What I'm saying to you is, as with the ancient tribe of Israel, it too now must be with the worldwide tribe of humanity, the tribe to which all of us so irrevocably and preciously belong. Surely all liberal religious thinkers realize how very rapidly our human world is shrinking. We now live in that global village Marshall McLuhan described, where all humanity is being ever more intricately woven together in an interdependent web of life, being, and Amazon. The various peoples and nations of humanity can no longer afford to imagine themselves separated and distinct from one another. If we are to survive on this tiny blue-green Earth spaceship, a new global consciousness in our interrelatedness must quickly be brought to birth. Humanity must begin learning how to live together as an interdependent family, with peace and understanding flowing into every corner of the globe. And consciousness of the human connectedness and responsibility begins, don't you see, with human hearts able to see and celebrate the bonds of we, rather than the brutalizing barriers of them. Now, believe me, I have no illusions about how hard and long will be the battle for this spiritual transformation toward genuine human oneness. We live, you and I, in terrible tribal times. It is with heavy heart that I realize that many of our world's leaders who currently dominate geopolitical affairs routinely think in parochial and tribal terms. Many are archaic and operative worldviews which slice up the globe into isolated camps of we versus them. Warfare, terrorism, arms race, famine, medical catastrophe like AIDS and COVID are allowed to prosper in the darkness of humanity's divisive little thinking. And I think probably we need to light another candle. If you saw on the news, there were 30 or 40 Palestinians killed in Jerusalem in the preceding night. The Israelis are expanding settlements in the West Bank, taking traditionally Palestinian lands, expelling Palestinian families, and putting more Jewish settlers onto that land. There is a real thing of apartheid going on that mirrors South Africa. And when Eli Wiesel talks about the Jews, one thing happening to a Jew anywhere happens to the Jews everywhere, we need to keep in mind what's happening in Israel right now. This spring, we witnessed one of the most heinous expressions of the evils of tribalism in the 20th century. I was at a Ramada Inn traveling, watching the evening news with the horrible images pouring out of the television, and suddenly I found tears streaming down my face. There before me were the obscene newsreel pictures. Probably you all saw the Kurdish father and child dead at the doorsill, murdered by Iraqi poison gas that day. You could see by the configuration of their bodies that the father had desperately tried to protect his daughter from the war crime that no nation has committed since World War II, but had failed. We must say to the Iraqis and Iranians and all others who would slaughter innocent human beings in such evil ways, no, it is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. We will not trade with you. We will not have an embassy on your soil until you stop this heinous, evil behavior. Of the many spiritual responsibilities that fall to us as Unitarian Universalists, none is more pressing than helping humanity to realize this holy interdependence and indissoluble oneness. How long ago was the Iraq War where they were being poisoned? 3 years, 4 years? Everything he said prior to this could be said today, exactly. The same thing is still going on. I want my religion, I want my Unitarian Universalist faith to call upon me to never enlarge that capacity of my heart, to challenge me toward goodness and mercy even when it comes at great personal cost. I want a faith that teaches my soul to organically feel the joy of others and the sorrow of others, which reminds me of my inescapable responsibility to love and serve my far-flung, often difficult family. I want a church which refuses to let me morally and spiritually separate myself from the trials and tribulations of my global brothers and sisters, wherever and whenever and however I find them. I want a faith, if you will, that burns the pillow of my heart and keeps me awake whenever there is as much as one human being somewhere in need of my compassionate care. So may your pillow catch fire, dear Unitarian Universalist friends, when the evening news flashes into your living room, the images of starving, fly-covered Ethiopian children dying in their mother's arms, then may your pillow catch fire. May your pillow catch fire when some despairing bag lady spends another lonely night in some filthy, urine-soaked alleyway. Then may your pillow catch fire. May your pillow catch fire every time a young man with AIDS is dying alone in your neighborhood because nobody cares. Then may your pillow catch fire. May your pillow catch fire every time a minority child from the poor side of town is bitten on the face by a rat because this society does not care enough to take care of adequate, humane housing. Then may your pillow catch fire. May your pillow catch fire every time one of your neighbors is sick or aggrieved and needs simple healing of your holy touch. Then may your pillow catch fire. May your pillow catch fire every time there is some human kindness waiting for you that no one else but you can bring to birth. May the pillow of your pulsating hearts evermore catch fire, for it is ever and always, as the Universalist poet Carl Sandburg sang at the very end of his collected poems, there is only one horse on the earth, and his name is all horses. There is only one bird in the air, and her name is all wings. There is only one fish in the sea, and the fish's name is all fins. There is only one man in the world, and his name is all men. There is only one woman in the world, and her name is all women. There is only one child in the world, and that child's name is all children. There is only one maker in the world, and that maker's children cover the earth, and they are named all God's children. That's us, dear friends. That's us. Amen. Comments? Thoughts? Go home, think about it. Think about your family, your relationship with your family, and why you do the things you do. A constant struggle for all of us. Why do we do the things we do? We catch ourselves reacting in an automatic fashion. I can remember growing up as a child with a parent who was not real patient, and you just freeze. You go back into a situation where you know what you should do, you know what you should say, but you just freeze. You can't do anything. It happens in marriages. It happens in relations at work. Try to think your way through that and find your way out of that and value other human beings. Okay. Our offering. Mike, you have something? 23rd Psalm.
I think we're all familiar with the 23rd Psalm. This is an adaptation to that because it's Mother's Day in honor of mothers.
Good song.
table before me in the presence of my foes. She anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever and ever. Glory be to our mother and daughter, and to the Holy of Holies, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, a world without end. Amen.
Amen. And a blessing to all our mothers. Here's the words now that we're done. Okay, our closing hymn is 409 in your hymnal. These I thought were just amazing pictures. I never knew that there was a tortoise taxi. That's an astounding picture. And I can't believe, I'm such a cynic, I'm sure somebody put those little girls up there. I can't believe they just crawled up there on their own. But I have seen mother hens do that more than once, and it is quite the picture. Okay, 409. It's 409, Sleep, My Child, the perfect song for Mother's Day. That mother that we all wish we had, or if you were lucky, you did have. Mother, I can feel you near me all through the night. Beat you, Kenny. For those of you at home, I hope you're not getting whiplash because I'm not doing that kind of slow turn. Just whip it over there and get it done. Closing words. Benediction for a People in a Pandemic by Anya, Samuel, and Michael. When faced with a challenge such as this, we can turn toward one another or we can turn against. The close-up of the stacked hands of 5 people standing in a circle, we can ignore the cries of our neighbors or we can let them cry into the arms of our witness. We can respond with indifference to systemic injustice or we can commit to its undoing. Good souls, tales will be told of how we responded when this particular hell was visited upon our earth. Let us know and let it be said by generations to come that when the pain of our separation was revealed, we moved closer to the promised land of our beloved community. And even hyenas have good families. I love this picture. And our postlude, and of course, I can't finish without a horse, is Mother. Thank you, Lloyd. That closes our service from the First Universalist Church in New Madison. We send our greetings and hopefully a happy day to all those current mothers, past mothers, and mothers who would want to be mothers. Coffee in the back and leftovers from last week.